Well, on every platform except YouTube, I am now about to interview Scott Ritter, a former Marine Corps intelligence officer, a former United Nations weapons inspector, a man who knows everything about military affairs, about warfare, and about the international politics that underpins and drives warfare in the modern age. You would have thought would be a very much in-demand guest. Any sensible person, whether they agreed with him or not, would want to hear, would want to see what it is he has to say. But he has been pursued by one social media company after another, which has sought to strangle him algorithmically, sought to destroy him personally, to criminalize him, and to, if necessary, ban him altogether. He's been banned altogether on YouTube, even though just on our show itself, he's responsible for hundreds of millions of views just on the mother of all talk shows. That's quite considerable business for YouTube. But they are more interested in silencing inconvenient voices and inconvenient truths than they are in the profitability of their own company. Clearly, they're making far too much money, paying far too little in tax. They can afford to sacrifice one big hitter after another. So this week, they demanded that we drop Scott Ritter as a guest from the mother of all talk shows. We refused, and we will continue to refuse, not just because we feel we need to hear his analysis, but because after Scott Ritter, the deluge. Once you can no longer have Scott Ritter on your show, it will be open season on anyone that the power doesn't like. So everywhere, except on YouTube, a big welcome to the one and only Scott Ritter. Scott, welcome back to the mother of all talk shows. First of all, your comment on the absurd attempt to bully us into dropping you as a guest. Do you just brush these things off your shoulder, or do you have something you particularly want to say about that?
Well, I mean, look, on the one hand, if you spend too much time worrying about it, you're focused on the wrong thing. I'm focused on trying to learn as much as I can about the problems that confront us in this world, figure out how to digest it, and then regurgitate it to an audience in a way that's meaningful, that empowers them with knowledge and information. YouTube was a very effective platform for me. It was also a financially relevant platform. I'm in the business of alternative media, just like you are, and income. I don't have the alternative media money tree out in my backyard that I can go shake anytime I need to pay my mortgage or buy groceries or something. You work hard, you perform, and income would be generated. When YouTube banned me, they gutted the income stream, and we've had to make adjustments, and we're not going to be silenced. But this is not free speech. This is controlled speech. This is not what a free society is supposed to be about. This is a heavily censored society. Censorship can take place in many different forms, and one of them is what we're witnessing here, denying people access to platforms which have become the public square. I mean, YouTube, is the number one platform for podcasts of this nature. There's no other platform that can match it in terms of its ability to get the message out yet. But if they keep doing what they're doing, hopefully people will realize that YouTube, by viewing YouTube, subscribing to YouTube, you're actually facilitating censorship. And I'm glad that we're on Rumble. Rumble is a free speech platform. They've been very good to my podcast, and I think if we work with Rumble, we'll be able to get it up to where it needs to be, so that it is a competitor in every way, shape, and form to YouTube. And that's what we need: competition. YouTube has made it clear they don't want to be in the free speech business. So if you're in the free speech business, you need to get away from YouTube.
Yeah, I agree with you. Let's not focus too much on it. But I just mentioned in passing all the things that we used to say about other people, other countries, are now the norm in our countries. We were, it's a laughable phrase, we were the free world as measured against the unfree, the imprisoned world. And now, well, frankly, we are as bad, if not worse, as any of those we used to traduce. But let me move on to what you rightly say are more important issues. The moment at which we stand could scarcely be more portentous. The reports are that Iran tested a nuclear weapon under their own desert this afternoon. If true, it means that we now have two nuclear-armed powers, Israel and Iran, who are about to exchange what could in the end be the ultimate fire of the nuclear war. Both belligerents have allies who are themselves nuclear hypersonically armed. So America and France and Britain are with Israel. Russia and China and Pakistan, by the way, and North Korea, by the way, are with Iran. So you don't have to be Einstein to work out this is a pretty dangerous moment, Scott. What say you?
I'm going to withhold judgment on the nuclear test just for a number of reasons. One, in order to divert sufficient material outside of the International Atomic Energy Agency's monitoring, and they still are monitoring, under safeguards. This, I believe, would be a detectable event. And the other thing is that I think Iran, and I base this on a conversation I had with President Raisi last year in September of 2023 when he came to the United Nations about Iran's deterrence posture. And I said, do you need nuclear weapons to adequately deter Israel? Or are your ballistic missiles sufficient? And if you deem your ballistic missiles sufficient, deterrence doesn't work unless the other side is convinced that what you have is capable of destroying them. And he reiterated that Iran was not interested in nuclear weapons. And he said that if Israel wanted to test Iran about its ballistic missile capability, it would soon find out. Well, Israel has tested, Iran has shown, and let there be no doubt, Iran's conventionally armed ballistic missile capability can destroy Israel. The fact is, if Israel does attack Iran, Israel will be destroyed. Their infrastructure, critical infrastructure, would be destroyed. All power plants destroyed, gas distribution, oil production, energy production, major lines of communication. Basically, Israel will cease to exist as a modern nation state. That's the fate of Israel should they seek to push this forward. Having said that, though, I will point out that the former foreign minister of Iran, who is a member of the Expediency Discernment Council, a very senior level advisory body to the supreme leader, said last May that if Israel threatens to attack Iran's nuclear infrastructure or actually attacks it, Iran would develop a nuclear weapon, that they would change their stance. Things have happened. Things have accelerated. I believe that if this wasn't a test, Iran will be in a position to do such a test if Israel attacks their nuclear infrastructure, if Israel attacks Iran with a nuclear weapon. There's reason to believe that if you want to take out, for instance, the Firdos nuclear enrichment plant, which is deep inside an underground facility outside of Qom, that can't be done conventionally. That would have to be done using a nuclear bunker buster, and even then you might not get it. If Israel is foolish enough to do that, what I predict is that Iran will, in rapid order, build 3 to 5 nuclear weapons, and Israel will cease to exist as an entity. That's where we're at, and this shouldn't please anybody. When we're talking about nuclear war, when we're talking about the death and destruction of tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of innocents, I'd advise everybody who hasn't, go buy Annie Jacobsen's book, Nuclear War Scenario, and read it. I've been skimming through it. I went ahead and bought it yesterday. I read it in one sitting. It brought to vivid life everything that I've been warning people about. And the one thing that comes across, because when she wrote this book, she interviewed literally dozens of former officials. And the one thing that came across is the sense of guilt they all felt when talking about an actual nuclear war, meaning they all know what the consequences are. They all know that you can't even consider it. The world literally ends for humanity. And yet we're on full automatic. And most people don't even realize it. It's high time that we actually understand that we are literally minutes away from death and at any time, and that we need to take the threat of nuclear war very seriously. It's the single most important issue of our time. But I mean, again, I've talked to you about this before. I hope it's not the case, but we may not finish this interview, because once it begins, it's over in 72 minutes. The whole world ends. So we need to take this seriously. And now, previously we were talking about the United States and Russia, but now we're talking about Israel and Iran in a potential nuclear conflict. This is insane. This is literally insanity. Why the West is allowing Israel to do this to not only itself, but to the world is beyond me. This could end right now if the West stood up to Israel and said no more. But the West won't stand up to Israel. Emmanuel Macron, what a humiliating moment for this man to finally appear to, have some testosterone in his body, to say, I will stop selling weapons, only to be chastised publicly by Benjamin Netanyahu, and then he backs down and resumes the sale of weapons. Why we allow this criminal state, this criminal enterprise, to have this much control over us is beyond me. But we do allow it, and the end result could be all of our deaths in a nuclear hoax. Because once a nuclear war begins, again, that's one of the things that Annie Jacobsen talked about. It doesn't necessarily begin between the United States and Russia. Once a nuclear weapon is used, all bets are off.
Annie Jacobsen's book is the most significant and important book I've read for many years, if not decades. A mere reading of the foreword itself, never mind the book, would chill your blood if you were a normal human being. Evidently, our leaders have not read the book or the foreword, or they imagine that somehow they can go on living and ruling in a world that has been destroyed in a nuclear holocaust, which, as I was trying to explain earlier, is simply nonsense. Now, where we, Scott, Israel says it's going to attack Iran. Either or, its nuclear facilities, its oil industry, or its political leadership, or any combination of those, including all of those. Do they mean it, do you think? Are they really going to do that? And what will Iran's first response be if they do?
I don't know if this is a negotiating ploy. Just a couple hours ago, I read that the Biden administration is talking about, massive new agreements with Israel, guarantees, military equipment, political support, if they just don't attack Iran. So I don't know if Netanyahu is playing a political game where he is bluffing to get concessions from the United States. I pray that this is the case, so that he doesn't attack. I had a conversation with Saeed Mohammed Mirandi the other night, and I know you're familiar with him. A man who while he isn't in the government now, is somebody who understands Iran, its policies, etc. He made it clear that there, the response of Iran to any attack on its soil will be decisive. And what I mean by decisive, Iran fired between 180 and 200 missiles at Israel. The next salvo will probably be upwards of 1,000 missiles at one time, which will be immediately followed by a reload and firing of an additional 1,000 missiles. And then Iran may even repeat that exercise. The saturation of Israel by Iranian ballistic missiles will be absolute. There won't be a single, and first of all, there's not that many targets. Israel's a small country. They have 5 or 6 power plants. I mean, if Israel hits them the way they hit the most protected airfields in Israel, the power plants cease to exist. There's a handful of desalination plants. You take this out, you take out other grid. There won't be electricity, there won't be running water in Israel for months, if not years. It'll destroy Israel as a modern nation state. And this is just the infrastructure. What if Iran decides to take out important governmental? If Israel strikes, as some news stories suggest, the Ayatollah Khamenei's compound, or they strike the presidential compound, then the Kiryat is going to be leveled. That's the military headquarters in downtown Tel Aviv. The government section will be leveled. Is this the direction Israel wants to go? Because there's no coming back. Israel doesn't have resilience. Israel doesn't have depth. Israel is a very small country, and Iran is positioned to wipe it off the face of the earth using conventional weapons. And it will happen. It will. This is 100% certainty, because otherwise Iran loses all credibility, all deterrence value. It's open season. If Israel attacks Iran and Iran doesn't respond, then Israel will continue to attack Iran. Iran has to follow through with what it has said it's going to do. And Iran may have some wild cards. The head of the Revolutionary Guard has said there will be weapons we will use against Israel that we have never used before, implying weapons of even greater destructive capacity. Again, I hope that this is a negotiated.
Unimaginable was one phrase that was used, that the response will be unimaginable, which is definitely dramatic. In the time we've got left, Scott, I wanted to ask you, as a former soldier and as a man who knows about these things, you would not have been surprised by the early skirmishes on the Lebanese border. The Israelis are good at killing people from the sky, people who have no anti-aircraft capacity, anti-aircraft fire capacity, people who have no bomb shelters. You can murder them like fish in a barrel. But once you put your soldiers up against the soldiers of, in this case, the Lebanese resistance, things don't go so well. So I know you will not have been surprised by that. But what does Israel do next on that ground offensive? Do they call it off? Do they admit defeat? What is in it for them to continue a ground assault on Lebanon when the early indicators are that they're no match for the defenders from the Lebanese resistance?
I think what Israel is hoping for is that they can destroy enough of the Hezbollah leadership that there's a collapse of command and control that would compel the defenders to withdraw on their own volition. But anybody who believes that doesn't understand the nature of resistance, of the cellular structure of resistance, and the fact that Hezbollah has been preparing for this very fight for 18 years. Every square inch of southern Lebanon, south of the Litani River, has been looked over by Hezbollah. They understand every potential vantage point, every potential ambush point. They've pre-registered mortar systems. They know where their artillery is going to hit when they fire it. Israel is literally walking into one ambush potential after the other, after the other, after the other. And eventually they will bog down as they did in 2006. Israel cannot win this fight conventionally. They will lose. And I think the Israeli military understood that going in, that this was too tough of a nut to crack. But they were hoping that they could get Iran and Hezbollah leadership to break, and this would, cause the ground level forces to crumble and withdraw. They're wrong. There will be no breaking. Iran has shown that it will not crack. Hezbollah's leadership has gone into the resistance mode. They have basically said, we're not electing a senior official anymore. There won't be a head. We're going into, basically a war council. We're not telling you who they are. We're now an official wartime resistance movement against something they've prepared for 18 years. Nothing that's happening is taking Hezbollah by surprise. Nothing that's happening is taken by surprise. Everything they're doing to the Israelis is taking them by surprise.
So what, they just reinforce failure? They send more and more young Israeli boys to their death in the hills and in the glades of South Lebanon?
That's what they did in 2006 until they admitted they couldn't win and they withdrew. That's what will happen today unless there's some sort of political intervention that creates a face-saving mechanism for Israel to say, okay, we'll stop our invasion and we'll withdraw in exchange for a ceasefire, things of that nature. But right now, the political there's no political solution right now that provides a face-saving mechanism for Netanyahu. He's about to become humiliated. When Israel is destroyed, that changes everything. We're looking at the strategic defeat of Israel. I think what everybody needs to prepare for is if Israel attacks Iran, we are looking at the strategic defeat of Israel.
Well, look, this was a very important interview in many ways, as I expected it to be. It's an interview that should have been seen by as many people as possible. Thanks to YouTube, that will not be on their platform. Scott Ritter, as always, thanks for joining us on the mother of all talk shows.